Over 5 years had slipped by since my wife of 15 years, Jennifer, a former manager at a local bank branch, asked for a divorce. She told me it was because she'd stopped loving me, claiming there was no one else and that we'd simply grown apart. I couldn't quite believe her, but I never found proof to challenge her story. Not long after, I overheard her on a call talking about some big changes. We agreed on joint custody of our daughters, who were 14 and 12 at the time. Both girls chose to stay with her after private discussions. Today, while flipping through the newspaper, an article caught my eye about Jennifer, now Jennifer Taylor, attending a high-profile charity event in New York with her husband, Nestor Taylor. He was a senior vice president, and she was now a junior VP. Our daughters, Angela and Aubrey, now 19 and 17, were featured too. It was unmistakably Jennifer. She'd reached the status she'd always seemed to crave, mingling in high society circles. Ironically, Nestor was once just a casual friend from her bank days, back when we were still together. Now, my daughters even carried his last name, not mine. My first reaction was to contact my assistant, who happened to be Jennifer's distant cousin, to confirm what I saw. But Alice wasn't at work that day. She had taken some personal time. On the day our divorce was supposed to be finalized, Jennifer hadn't even shown up. I asked my lawyer to find out why. The judge had insisted we both needed to testify about the agreement we'd reached. Then her lawyer disclosed that she had moved out of state with the girls, without my permission. I'd never approved of that. When the judge asked me if I'd agreed to the relocation, I made it clear I hadn't. And that's when things started to unravel. Judge Reed's face went cold as soon as he understood what was happening. "Could you step out and try calling them?" he asked. I went outside and dialed, but all 3 numbers were disconnected. Checking their social media profiles, I found myself blocked on all fronts. Returning to the courtroom, I informed my lawyer, who then relayed the details to the judge. Without hesitation, the judge issued a warrant for Jennifer's arrest on charges of parental kidnapping, suspending the divorce case until she could appear in court. Her lawyer protested, trying to argue it wasn't that serious, suggesting that I could verify our custody agreement. But the judge shut that down, saying he just confirmed he didn't agree to the children leaving the state. Then came accusations from her family, claiming she'd moved because of alleged abuse toward our daughters. Some of her colleagues at the bank even seemed willing to support the rumors, though no proof was ever shown. People just believed her, maybe because she'd built a reputation that somehow shielded her. It didn't seem to matter that I'd done nothing wrong. I was just a man left to watch my life fall apart. Despite these rumors, interviews with my daughters revealed that they'd never spoken of any abuse. But Jennifer's family spread tales around town, further isolating me. Over the years, the judge and I had become friends, bonding over our shared love for fishing. That night, after dinner, I paid him and his wife a visit. Bringing along the newspaper, I told him, "There's something you need to see." I opened the article for him. He took one look and muttered under his breath, "Amy, could you pass me my phone?" "William, give me a moment." The judge's face turned pale when he saw my daughters in the photos. "Good Lord, they've been right in front of us all these years," he said. I went outside, finding a spot on their patio, where Amy joined me with a beer in hand. "He's on the phone with the FBI," she said. "What did you show him?" she asked, and I replied, "A photo of Jennifer with her new husband and my daughters. It's the first time I've seen her alive in 5 years." Amy nodded gravely. "It's a federal case now, interstate flight with a kidnapping charge." When I asked why the bank hadn't helped locate her, Amy said, they cited some legal ruling, saying it was a family matter and they weren't required to comply. I left their home feeling emotionally drained, telling the judge he could reach me in my office in the morning. That night was one of the longest I'd faced, and I couldn't help but question if there had been more between Jennifer and Nestor back when we were married. I reminded myself, though, that Angela was already born when Jennifer started working at the bank. The next morning, I found myself worrying about Alice. Over the years, she'd grown increasingly frustrated with her cousin. She believed me and had proven her support many times. I wanted to confide in her, to share the weight of it all, but I held back, knowing she deserved a life free from my chaos. To me, Alice was beautiful, with her auburn hair, warm smile, and kind spirit, a treasure any good man would be lucky to cherish. But for now, I kept my admiration to myself, knowing I couldn't pull her into this mess. Work kept me busy that day, thankfully keeping my mind off things. Late in the afternoon, Alice, my assistant, knocked and came in. "William, 2 men from the FBI are here to see you. Should I let them in? She asked. Of course, I've been expecting them, I replied, standing up to greet them. The agents introduced themselves. I'm Agent Diaz, and this is Agent Horton, one said. We're here to gather information on the case. I laid out the background, explaining my history with Jennifer's new husband and voicing my concerns over her relationship with him and my daughter's last name changes. I suggested DNA tests for clarity, and told them about Judge Reed putting the divorce on hold when Jennifer didn't show, filing parental kidnapping charges in the process. You'll also need to verify if she's filed for divorce in New York and check the validity of her new marriage, I advised. So the divorce wasn't actually finalized? Agent Horton asked. That's right, I confirmed. She ignored the judge's order to appear. Did you ever authorize her to take the kids out of state? Diaz questioned. Not at all, I replied, recalling how her lawyer had informed us of her move. I explained how, when I tried calling, her numbers were disconnected, and I was blocked on social media. She had moved before the divorce was finalized and remarried almost immediately. It's clear this was planned, Diaz observed. That doesn't match what she stated in her New York interview, Horton added. When did you last have contact? He asked. 2 weekends before the final court date, when they came to take their belongings, I said. Since then, no official updates, no legal notices, nothing. It seems I'm still legally married. We may be able to charge them with falsifying adoption papers, Diaz noted. I mentioned I'd questioned adoption papers but hadn't received any answers. Alice, could you draft a letter confirming my signature for the FBI? I asked her. Are you still at 87654 Yale? Diaz asked. No, I sold that place under court order after some disturbances, I said, explaining I'd moved to a quieter area by Pinewood Lake for my safety. After the agents left, I filled Alice in on everything. She was taken aback, expressing both shock and a kind of hopeful curiosity, but we both knew there were still far too many unanswered questions. Tonight, when I leave, I'm turning my cell phone off, I told her. If this situation starts weighing on you, use your own judgment. You can always call my home phone if there's an emergency. Alice had grown to despise her cousin Jennifer, especially for the way she'd shattered my reputation and connections, pushing me away from family and friends. Alice had seen the effects firsthand and wondered how much more could happen before the truth finally surfaced. She had watched me endure in silence for years, pouring myself into work and growing my client base threefold. I first met Alice when she was 14 and I was 19, at a family gathering where Jennifer's engagement had been the highlight. Alice had predicted it wouldn't last, noticing even then that I valued family, while Jennifer craved status. Years later, after her husband passed away, Alice had confided in me, finding comfort in my support. Over time, she came to see me as the one she'd want to grow old with, but my haunted past still weighed on me, leaving me hesitant. Jennifer's disappearance, along with our daughters, had stirred vicious rumors in town, some even accused me of serious crimes. One evening, while I was eating alone at a local diner, Jennifer's father approached me out of nowhere. He revealed that Jennifer had finally admitted I'd never harmed our daughters, confessing she'd fabricated those claims to justify leaving. I looked at him coldly, demanding written statements from relatives if he wanted me to take his word seriously. Many people in this town think I'm guilty of something I never did, I told him. He walked away, and I thought to myself that no 2-minute conversation could undo 5 years of suffering and deceit. Moments later, the waitress who had served me approached. Mr. Roberts, I went to school with your daughters. I just heard what he said, she began. They had no clue about what was happening. I remember seeing him and some others from your wife's family the Friday before they vanished, helping pack everything up. Thanks for telling me, I said. I've grown used to being lied to over the years. She returned to her work, and I made sure to leave her a generous tip. That weekend, fishing at the lake brought me some peace, and each evening I treated myself to my favorite meal, fresh rainbow trout. When Monday came, I was in the office early, making coffee when Alice arrived. She poured herself a cup and sat with me, looking unusually cheerful. Looking back, I said, Jennifer and I got married just after her high school graduation. Angela was born not long after. Back then, I was flipping houses, and she was working her way up at the bank. I heard what you told her father. Everyone did, Alice said. My phone rang all weekend. Can you blame me, after all the damage her family caused? I replied. That's why I asked for notarized statements, to clear my name. Are you planning to take legal action? She asked. Yes. I want to restore my reputation and restrict their funds, I said. It'll be interesting if those calls turn into statements, she said. Most people are good, but lies have a way of sticking. I gave a half smile. Maybe guilt will spur some truth. As I left work, I thanked Alice for lifting my spirits. She'd been my anchor through all this. By Thursday's lunch break, I had 24 notarized statements confirming that Jennifer had lied about my alleged abuse, purely as an excuse to leave town and manipulate her family into aiding her. Alice also managed to track down Jennifer's current address and employer. Your appointment with your lawyer is at 2, she told me. They'll serve her before pressing charges and freezing her assets. I couldn't help but think, Alice, you're leaving nothing to chance. God help Jennifer if you ever meet her face to face. Later that day, around 4:30, I returned to the office with a bottle of champagne and glasses. Alice's recommended lawyer had agreed to take my case, and I handed over everything, old court records, audio recordings, the judge's ruling, signed affidavits, and the warrant for Jennifer's arrest. I even included a news article about her new life, laying out all the connections between us. When the lawyer saw that the bank had been complicit in her actions, he suggested we could include them in a lawsuit for aiding in the harm done to you. If one suit covers both, count me in, I replied. He chuckled, saying, well, we Americans are known for suing over anything. Alice and I raised our glasses, but before we could finish, my phone rang. It was the judge. Hey, Salman, how are things? I answered. The FBI is moving forward with a grand jury against Jennifer and Nestor next Wednesday, he told me. They're going to request custody of Aubrey and DNA tests for all involved. Thank you, Salman, I said, relieved. And my divorce? I asked hopefully. I'll grant it once she's brought in, even by video, he assured me. Alice, sitting nearby, asked, can he jail her? I explained, the FBI will handle the kidnapping charges, but he can hold her in contempt of court. I nodded. This waiting has felt like hell, 5 years of it. But a few more weeks won't make much difference. The week flew by. On Thursday morning, my lawyer confirmed that Jennifer had been served, and her assets were frozen. That afternoon, I got a call from FBI agent Horton about setting up a DNA test. On Saturday, while I was out fishing, Alice called with news that Jennifer had been detained by the FBI. Curious, I headed to the office and read an article summarizing the charges against her and Nestor. They were being held for kidnapping, defined as using deceit to keep someone against their will for personal gain. Jennifer faced numerous charges for taking our daughters without permission, including forgery to hide them under Nestor's care. He had leveraged his position at the bank to obstruct my attempts to find them, and Jennifer had falsely accused me of abuse to justify her departure. Local officers were quoted, mentioning that some people had even believed I'd harmed my daughters and escaped justice. The article laid out the whole ordeal, and a regional newspaper called me, sympathizing with the living hell I'd endured for years. My name's partly cleared, I told myself, planning to sell my business and move away for good. As I collected evidence for my case, I learned that Angela, my eldest daughter, had been shocked by her parents' arrest and the revelation that I was still legally married to her mother. Angela left her current city after reading an article on the ordeal, reflecting on all the unanswered questions she had about her mother's actions. Later that evening, she drove by the old family home, but her presence attracted police attention. "Who are you, and why are you waiting here?" an officer asked. "I'm Angela Taylor," she replied calmly. "I was just waiting for the sheriff's department to leave so I could talk to my father." "And your father's name?" he asked. "William Roberts," she answered, watching his expression change. "Oh, wow," he said, surprised. "Tom, go tell the others to put some coffee on." "Miss Taylor, I'm Detective Reynolds. I know your father well. What brings you back now?" he asked. "Partly what I read last night in the article," she said. "I've got a copy in the car if you'd like to see it." "Please do, it'll help me understand your side," he replied. After she retrieved the article, they introduced themselves over coffee, and Detective Reynolds read it aloud. Everyone was silent, except him. "You believed my dad, didn't you?" Angela asked. "I was one of the few who did," he said. "But by the time your mother's family spread rumors, it was too late. He was stalked, his house was vandalized, and he was attacked. We almost lost him." People thought he'd done something terrible to you and your sister, so he became a complete outcast. In the South, we've got our own ideas about justice, Angela replied. Things got so bad that he had to leave. Where is he now? She asked. He lives on a 5-acre property by Pinewood Lake, with fences, electric wires, and a gate. No one's seen him in town outside of work in 2 years, Tom explained. How can I reach him? Angela wondered. I think I can help with that, Tom said. He checked his records for an emergency contact number, returning with Alice's name. Do you know Alice Garcia? He asked. I think she's my mom's cousin, Angela said. Why? She's the only person who can reach him anytime. She's been his rock through all this, Tom explained. She's actually headed to his office now to meet with you, he said, handing her the address. After thanking them, Angela left to find Alice, who held deep resentment toward Jennifer for all she'd put her father through. One officer muttered to another, what kind of woman would do this to her own family? Angela then recounted to Alice how, at 4 a.m. one Saturday, their mother had woken her and her sister in a rush, packing a few of their things before announcing a surprise trip to New York. Still drowsy, they were too confused to understand what was happening. We had no clue what was really going on, Angela said. Some of our relatives now admit they knew about her relationship with Nestor but thought it was just a friendship. I remember catching her chatting with him, but I didn't realize they'd worked together, Angela continued. She claimed they'd met at some regional conference and hit it off. It wasn't until half an hour into the drive that I noticed we didn't have our phones. When I confronted her, she said she'd been granted sole custody and that we were moving to New York because of her promotion and transfer. At the time, I believed her. Alice listened, recognizing some painful truths in Angela's account, especially after learning what Jennifer had kept hidden. I also asked about our laptops, Angela went on. She told us the phones were canceled because of the move, and she'd settled the bills. She claimed our laptops would be packed up with the rest of our things, but we never saw them again. We drove for 2 days to New York, and as we approached the city, she had Aubrey pull a new phone from her purse, one with a New York number. Angela recalled that they followed directions to Nestor Taylor's house, only learning later that he'd arranged her mother's so-called promotion to bring them closer together. Meanwhile, back home, their family had been instructed to get rid of all their belongings, except family photos, which were eventually mailed to them. While we unpacked, my sister and I found adoption papers, Angela explained. Nestor told us our parents agreed to it, and that he and Mom were getting married that night. Then Mom claimed he was our biological father and encouraged us to accept him. Alice sighed. Angela, I believe you. I've heard parts of this from family members recently. We only knew the school district had shared copies of your records so you could start fresh up there. Now that Jennifer's finally been found, people are beginning to talk. She added, just so you know, I recorded our conversation. I'll be sharing this with the FBI and your father. Let's grab an early dinner at the diner, Alice suggested. While we're at it, take a look at these notarized statements. Consider this, if your mother lied about your father, could she have lied about Nestor Taylor too? Alice stepped out briefly to give Angela some space, forwarding their conversation to me and to my civil lawyer, knowing its impact would be significant. She then sent it to the FBI. She kept a close eye on Angela, who seemed absorbed in thought and didn't attempt to contact anyone. A moment later, I texted Alice, I'll be waiting for you both to arrive, thank you. She texted back before stepping out again, giving Angela time to look over the statements. When she returned, Angela was sitting silently, her expression somber. Alice, why did my mother tell everyone that my dad had been hurting us for years? Angela asked. Alice sighed. Your mother knew that the family didn't really approve of him and used that to justify disappearing so suddenly. She also knew your father would try to find you, which he did. He even took legal action against the bank to get her location, and he won at first but lost on appeal, Alice explained. We only found out about her marriage and your name changes a few weeks ago, after your photo was published in the newspaper. Your dad served them the next day. Over the past 5 years, he's been hounded because of her actions, and twice we nearly lost him. Angela asked, her voice low, how is he, really? Alice looked down. He's changed. He's lost a lot of weight, and the stress has turned most of his hair white. He had to shut down his social media and remove his name from his business page because of the hate and threats. He used to be so outgoing, but now he keeps to himself, even doing personal shopping out of town to avoid attention. Things are improving for him, but it's slow. People here still think he did something terrible. Divorce is hard, but what he's gone through is far worse. Does he have anyone in his life? Angela asked, her voice quiet. Alice shook her head. With the reputation your mother gave him, who would dare? He's spent over 5 years defending himself against lies that can't be proven or disproven. Angela sat in silence, processing it all before saying, every time he tried to defend himself, it only made things worse. People had already decided he was guilty, and we vanished so suddenly that it gave instant credibility to her accusations. They planned everything perfectly, and he paid the highest price. Alice's voice broke slightly as she added, at one point, I feared he might end it all. Angela looked at her with new understanding, and they left for the diner together. As they headed to the car, Angela turned to Alice. Thank you. Alice looked at her, surprised. For what? She asked. For having the courage to stand by and love my dad all these years, Angela replied, her words bringing Alice to tears. Angela reached over to comfort her, and together, they headed to meet me at the restaurant. Meanwhile, I sat in my car outside, anxiously waiting for them to arrive. Emotions were running high as I replayed Alice and Angela's conversation in my head. I knew it was real, yet it was still hard to fully believe. When I finally saw them pull in, I fumbled to light a cigarette, my hands shaking. Angela had grown into a beautiful young woman, her features reminding me so much of my own mother, a painful reminder, since my own family had cut me off not long after my wife and daughters had disappeared. Finishing my cigarette, I turned off the car and prepared for one of the hardest walks of my life. The waitress who had served me weeks ago greeted me at the entrance, now working as the hostess. Angela's here, she said softly. I talked to her and her friend and seated them toward the back. Are you here to join them? I nodded, and she continued, she has her back to us. I'll show you to their table. Following her, I spotted Alice first, who smiled as I approached. Taking a deep breath, I sat beside her, gripping her hand for reassurance. For the first time in over 5 years, I looked directly into Angela's bright blue eyes. We didn't need words, tears began to fall from both of us. I had asked the hostess to bring a large flask of their house wine, and when it arrived, the waitress poured our first glasses and left us alone. Angela took in my appearance, noticing the changes, about 40 pounds lighter, thinner, older, with silver-white hair. With a bit of humor, she commented on my transformation, saying many would pay a fortune to get this look at my age. Eventually, she broke the ice by standing up, and I joined her, meeting her at the edge of the table in a heartfelt hug. She whispered, Dad, and I replied with Angie, the old nickname I'd given her. As the emotions settled, we ordered food. Angela noticed my new diet. I used to be a meat and potatoes kind of guy, but now I ordered a catfish platter with a side of unlimited salad. As Alice and I returned from the salad bar, Angela took the chance to talk to me alone. Alice loves you, Dad, she admitted, probably more than I do. She grilled me like an army sergeant until she was sure I was being honest. She wasn't going to let you get hurt again. I know I was old enough to find the truth myself, but I didn't. I don't think I'll ever forgive myself for that. Angela, I've had no life to offer anyone these past 5 years, I told her. People around here thought I'd done something terrible to all of you and gotten away with it. If anything had happened, I might have ended up in jail. That's why 3 years ago, after I was attacked twice and hospitalized, I changed my will to leave everything to you. Alice came back just then and saw Angela tearing up. She asked what had upset her. Not much, I said softly, only that I rewrote my will back then, thinking I might not make it, but knowing her love kept me going. Soon, both women were wiping away tears. After we finished lunch, we returned Angela's rental car and drove to my private home near Pinewood Lake. Angela and Alice admired the view and the layout of the house. When I offered to carry Angela's bags, she declined, giving me and Alice a moment alone. Why didn't you tell me sooner how you felt? Alice asked gently. I couldn't, I confessed. I felt trapped by my past, never knowing what might happen next. Jennifer and Nestor used that uncertainty against me. But now that I'm free from their accusations, I can finally offer you a future. Alice squeezed my hand affectionately, smiling. Then I guess it's time to put my own home up for sale, because I won't let you sell this place. Later, as Angela was coming back into the room, she caught us sharing a kiss, and it brought a shy smile to her face, leaving her with a touch of guilt, as if she were intruding on something precious. We spent the next hour catching up. Angela shared that she was stuck in a business job she found unfulfilling while pursuing her master's degree online, and she hadn't been dating anyone seriously. "Why don't you join us here?" I offered. "We could use your fresh perspective, and we'd be happy to help you get started at a junior level. Besides, after everything, you deserve a chance." "Are you serious?" Angela asked, looking surprised. "Absolutely," Alice chimed in, smiling. "We can start you off with a salary of $45,000 a year." Angela's eyes filled with emotion. "Wow, I guess I'll need to find a place to live," she said softly. "No rush, there's plenty of room here," I reassured her. "But I do expect you to help out with chores, just like old times." Angela's eyes welled up, and she said, "Dad, you've always been there for me." She added, "I'll fly back tomorrow to pack and get things in order. If I can find a flight, I should be here by Wednesday, driving down in my own car." As we exchanged phone numbers, Angela got a text from Aubrey, which she showed me. "Finally got my cell back. FBI holding me until DNA proves if Nestor Taylor's my dad. Found out the adoption papers were forged," Aubrey's message read. Angela quickly replied, "Dad's moving back home, joining his firm. His number is saved as Sir." Aubrey responded, "Bring my stuff, including my laptop. The lawyers will handle the rest. Oh, and check today's newspaper, it explains a lot." Angela texted back, "Call me when you can." Alice came out to the patio. "How are you holding up?" she asked. Emotionally overwhelmed, I admitted, pulling her into a hug. "Why don't I take Angela with me to pick up a few of my things?" Alice suggested, "That'll give you some time to process everything." I sent her the code for the gate lock and handed her the house keys to make copies, figuring we'd need a few extras. They were gone for about 2 hours, giving me the chance to finally release the years of pain I'd held inside. When they returned, everyone was smiling. I was on the patio, firing up the grill, with steaks ready, salad prepped, and potatoes baking. I watched them chat and laugh as they made 4 trips back and forth, unloading a few things to spread out on the bed. During our late dinner, Angela mentioned that she'd be flying out at 8 a.m. on Sunday, and Alice and I agreed to move more of her things once she was back. Seeing my daughters enjoy their meal brought a warmth to my heart. Over coffee, my phone rang. It was Agent Horton from the FBI. Only a few people had that number. "Mr. Roberts, it's Adam Horton. We've confirmed Aubrey's DNA test. She's yours. She's asked to come home and will be arriving in River Bend on Monday at 7:30 a.m., he informed me." "That's wonderful news," I replied. "Alice and I will be there to meet her." "Perfect," he said. "Angela's on her way back already." Aubrey saw the article online, by the way, and as for Nestor Taylor, he was devastated. Jennifer had him convinced she was his. "One more thing," I asked, "what are my daughter's legal names now?" "They're legally Roberts," Adam assured me. "We'll be sending the court ruling Monday to update their IDs." He ended the call, leaving me overwhelmed. Tears filled my eyes, and I had to pause to compose myself. Alice and Angela looked concerned, but I quickly reassured them. "Aubrey's coming home," I said, "and the DNA results confirm she's mine." Both Alice and Angela shared my joy. Apparently, Jennifer had even convinced Nestor that Aubrey was his, I added. Alice shook her head. "I always suspected it," she said. "Did she ever tell anyone the truth?" Angela asked. I turned to Angela with a gentle smile. "I've got some news. You'll need to change your last name back to Roberts. A federal court ruled that the adoption was invalid." Angela ran into my arms, relieved. "Taylor never felt right anyway," she said. The next day, we saw Angela off as she headed back to pack her things for the move. Then Alice and I went to meet her brothers and their wives, who had offered to help with moving furniture. Only 2 of the bedrooms in my home were furnished, so we had plenty of space for what Angela wanted to bring. The full story had made it into Sunday's local newspaper. We met up with Alice's family for breakfast at a nearby diner, where they noticed the happiness radiating from Alice. Her sisters-in-law joked that, with Alice's cooking, I'd put some meat back on my bones in no time. The restaurant owner, a longtime friend, came by to congratulate me. "William, this meal's on us," he said warmly. With everyone's help, we moved everything in one long day. Alice's sisters-in-law seemed a little envious of her new home, which we invited them to visit again when we hosted our first housewarming party. Back at the airport early Monday morning, Alice had informed everyone who needed to know that we wouldn't be in, and they responded, "We guessed that after reading the Sunday paper." I watched Aubrey step off the small plane, looking different yet the same in jeans and a tank top. It was surreal. My little girl who'd once worn pigtails was now a striking young woman. The moment she saw me, she ran forward, her face lighting up. As the sliding doors opened, she called out, "Daddy," and leaped into my arms. We let the emotions flow, barely aware of the cameras around us. Alice told the local reporter, "That's William Roberts and his youngest daughter. Half the town thought they were gone, but they were kidnapped. This is the first time they've seen each other in over 5 years." As we turned to the reporter, Aubrey stepped forward and declared, "I'm Aubrey Roberts, and this is my father, William Roberts. 5 years ago, with the help of my mother's family, we were taken from him. Rumors spread that he had hurt us, but it's not true. Our dad would never do that. My mother's family may be capable of such things, but not him. Anyone who comes after him will be coming after me and my sister, because we stand with him as family." She continued, "When our mother left, she claimed my dad was just a man getting what he deserved, but he didn't deserve this. He's the most honorable person I know." I introduced Aubrey to Alice, and she hugged her, saying, "Angela and I talked a lot yesterday. It turns out our mother lied to Nestor too. For her own sake, she almost destroyed all our lives. We know you and Dad were thinking about getting married, and as far as Angela and I are concerned, we want to move forward without the past haunting us." Alice's eyes filled with tears. "You couldn't have said it better, Aubrey. And if you promise to be one of my bridesmaids, we'll make it official. Let's grab some breakfast," I suggested. "Then we can get you some new clothes at the department store." "Can we go to Denny's?" Aubrey asked. "Is it still open?" "Well, there's Huddle House nearby," I replied. She grinned, "That works." Watching her eat, I couldn't help but laugh. Her appetite reminded me of her childhood. For the first time in years, I felt like I had my life back. It wasn't just a house anymore, it was a home. Later, while shopping for clothes, I conveniently got lost and wandered off, letting Alice and Aubrey discuss the more personal items. Somehow, no matter how long we'd been apart, some things just felt timeless. By the time they realized I was missing, I was almost back. "Where did you go?" Alice asked as I returned. "Had to use the restroom," I replied, shrugging. I then sat nearby as Aubrey tried on clothes, seeking my opinion for reasons I didn't quite understand. I honestly thought she looked great in anything. After spending $300, we left the store with 2 full bags. Back at the house, Alice took Aubrey upstairs to show her the now-furnished bedrooms. Alice's face lit up when Aubrey chose the room with her master bedroom furniture. Later, we relaxed on the patio, enjoying the early morning before the heat set in. The ladies had iced tea, and I had a cold beer. I walked over to Alice, took the ring box out of my pocket, and got down on one knee, catching her by surprise. "Since I haven't officially asked," I said, opening the box with a 3-ring set, "will you marry me, once the divorce is final, of course?" She said yes, her eyes sparkling, and Aubrey recorded the whole moment on video, sending it to Angela with the caption, "Yes, it fits." I'd found out Alice's ring size from her brother, which made it all the more special. About half an hour later, Alice received an unexpected call, and both Aubrey and I noticed her tearing up. I didn't understand until she handed me the phone. The person on the line congratulated me, and I recognized Angela's voice. "Are you on the road already?" I asked. "Left at 4 yesterday. I've been driving almost non-stop since," Angela said. "Less traffic at night and fewer cops. My car does fine cruising at just over 100. She reassured me that she had Aubrey's things with her and added, "Just pulled off the exit ramp in River Bend. Directions?" I texted her the details and shook my head, unsure whether to feel proud or exasperated by her 24-hour marathon drive. As Angela's car approached, the girls were at the door, waiting to greet her. She looked tired but otherwise fine, and seeing my 3 girls together for the first time hit me hard. Angela's first move was to check out Alice's engagement ring. Just then, the house phone rang, and I quickly went to answer it. "William, it's Lenny," he said. "We're swamped here. Some of the clients we lost due to rumors are coming back, and we're getting new ones from out of state. If this keeps up, we'll need more staff." "That's a good problem to have," I replied. "Angela starts as a junior next week. She's still green, but she's working on her MBA. Can I have her on my team? Lenny asked. It'll be long hours, but she'll learn. I agreed, knowing Angela would gain solid experience with Lenny, who'd joined us fresh out of college and climbed his way up. He always emphasized hands-on learning, where anyone could step in and explain an issue if they saw one, and he encouraged everyone to ask questions. Alice and I are taking the rest of the week off, I added. We have a lot to sort out with our engagement, the girls coming home, and handling some legal stuff, including enrolling Aubrey in school. Engaged? Lenny asked, surprised. Oh, that reminds me, we got a letter from the FBI for you. Can you swing by at 5 to pick it up? Definitely, thanks for the reminder, I said before hanging up. At 4:30, the four of us headed into town, deciding to celebrate our first official meal as a family at the seafood place Angela and Aubrey chose. I stopped by the office on the way and asked Angela if she wanted to see where she'd be working. She agreed, so we all went in. The receptionist led us to the biggest conference room, where there was a large cake and a banner that read "Congratulations" awaited us. Angela met her new boss, and everyone was thrilled to see us together, noting that my daughters had already started calling Alice Mom. We arrived at the restaurant around 6:30, just in time for their all-you-can-eat shrimp special. My daughters lost track of how many they ate, while I surprised myself by eating raw lemons as easily as some people eat oranges. Together, we went over the court ruling. The first point highlighted that the document used for the adoption could easily be found on legaladop.com, requiring no lawyer. The second noted that handwriting experts found that my signature had been traced, revealing breaks in the ink flow inconsistent with my usual signature. The third point was that I'd never signed with my full middle name, and the fourth giveaway was the date, which was recorded after they'd already left the state. The second page officially reinstated Angela and Aubrey's legal last name as Roberts. We spent the week sorting out legal details, starting with a trip to the Federal Records Office, then to the State Attorney's Office to restore their birth certificates, and finally to the State Licensing Center for new driver's licenses. Personally, I found it satisfying to register Aubrey back in the same school, facing the same principal who had once treated me poorly. On Thursday, our last task was getting new cell phones for both girls. On Friday, Angela and Aubrey followed us to the dealership, where Alice let me trade in her car and Angela's for new ones. Each of them got a 2019 Ford Escape on a lease-to-own basis through the company. Back at the house, I wrote Angela a check for the trade-in value, applying it toward the down payment. Later, my divorce lawyer called with news of our court hearing scheduled for Monday at 1 p.m. For the first time in 5 years, my daughters and I will appear in court together. I asked Alice if she wanted to come, and she agreed without hesitation. As we sat before Judge Reed, we watched Jennifer appear on a large monitor. Without her usual flair, dressed in prison orange, she looked like a different person entirely. The judge started by questioning her lawyer about the contempt charge. Her lawyer claimed she hadn't understood the requirement to be in court that day. The judge wasn't buying it. Did you remind her repeatedly during the settlement process? He asked. Yes, her lawyer replied. Are you so incompetent that you actually believe your client might be telling the truth? The lawyer's face turned red as he replied, No, how does your client plead? The judge demanded. No contest, Your Honor, the lawyer answered. The judge didn't hesitate. I sentence her to 5 years, to be served after any federal time, he declared coldly. Her lawyer protested, Your Honor, isn't that extreme? Not in my eyes, the judge replied. But she can appeal. He added, as for the divorce, it's granted in favor of Mr. Roberts. All remaining assets are his. She forfeited her rights the day she left the state with her minor daughters, the judge declared. Turning to my lawyer, he instructed, draw up the divorce decree and include a waiver for the required number of waiting days. Your client has waited long enough. My client has one final request, my lawyer interjected. What is that? The judge asked, looking at me. He's recently engaged to Miss Alice Garcia and wonders if you'd be willing to officiate the civil ceremony when they marry, my lawyer explained. Alice and the girls nearly jumped out of their seats with excitement. I smiled, as my lawyer and I had planned this request, hoping it would go just as it did. If the judge agreed, my lawyer was to use the funds held in trust to pay off the car leases, transfer ownership to Alice and the girls, and write me a check for the remaining balance. I'd be honored. Congratulations to them both, it's long overdue, the judge said with a broad smile. On the monitor, Jennifer's face flashed with shock, as though she'd expected a light sentence but received anything but. It likely stung to learn that I was marrying her younger cousin. With a bang of the gavel, the judge announced, "Court is adjourned." As we stood to leave, the judge walked over, shaking my hand warmly. I introduced him to my future wife and daughters with the respect he deserved. "I'm not on the bench now, so just call me Salman," he told them. Before we left, he leaned in and said, "We need to get on a fly fishing trip soon, William, before the weather gets too hot." As we walked out of the courtroom, my girls chatted nonstop, filling the air with laughter and excitement. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed the lively energy until I found myself wishing for a good pair of earplugs. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a couple slipping quietly out of the courtroom. My heart sank as I realized it was my parents. My dad's words from when he disowned me echoed in my mind, "Forgiveness is easy, forgetting is not." I was beginning to understand just how true that was. Back home, wedding plans filled the air, transforming our house with new energy. Alice put her home up for sale, while Angela settled into her new job at my firm, quickly impressing everyone with her sharp mind. Aubrey reconnected with old friends, and the consulting firm became busier than ever, landing contracts with 2 major corporations needing complete restructuring. Angela surprised us all by identifying costly issues that had gone unnoticed, turning them around in just 3 weeks and resulting in a surge in sales for our client. One night, as Alice and I lay in bed, she brought up something unexpected. "You know, dear, my biological clock is ticking," she said, looking at me with those soft eyes. "How long do you think we should wait before trying for 1 or 2 of our own?" I hadn't thought about it, but after all she'd been through with me, I couldn't say no. "As long as you're not showing in the wedding photos, I'll leave that up to you," I replied, with a grin. Needless to say, neither of us got much sleep that night. We set our vows for Mother's Day, keeping it small and intimate with the lake as our backdrop. Angela was my maid of honor, with Aubrey and one of Alice's nieces as bridesmaids. My best man was Lenny, and 2 nephews acted as ushers. Alice's brothers helped prepare the yard, and Judge Reed married us under an arbor of spring flowers. We kept it simple, us men in blue jeans, cowboy hats, and matching boots, while the ladies dressed up in flowing gowns. Alice wore a classic white dress, while her bridesmaids wore cheerful yellow. Her extended family provided a barbecue spread, and by evening, our patio turned into a dance floor with live music. As life continued, Jennifer and Nestor's criminal trial began, and Nestor filed for divorce. Meanwhile, my civil lawyer was coordinating with their attorneys and the legal team at the bank regarding our case. Father's Day was coming up, and although I knew Alice and my daughters were planning something special, I had no clue what. On Father's Day morning, Alice and I were out fishing at dawn. The fish were biting so well that we reached our limit within an hour. Just as we were about to head back, Alice handed me a card. I opened it to find a simple yet incredible message: "Happy Father's Day, Daddy. We're pregnant, and it's a boy." In my excitement, I jumped up and accidentally flipped the canoe, sending us and all our gear straight into the water. We lost everything: the fish, the poles, and the tackle box. By the time we paddled back, completely soaked, Alice was laughing, and when the girls found out how I learned the news, they thought it was hilarious. Apparently, they'd known about Alice's pregnancy for a while. It took time for things to finally feel calm, but nothing could compare to the peace I felt watching my son come into the world. He arrived loudly, weighing 7 pounds, and, unexpectedly, I found myself calling my mom from the maternity ward. When she arrived, I brought her to Alice's room, where she was cradling our son. "His name is Colin," I told her. My mother broke down, overwhelmed. Colin had been her grandfather's name. As for my dad and me, we still didn't speak. He would have to be the one to come to me, and so far, he hadn't. But each day is a new day, and life moves forward.